Bonjour, welcome. Hello and welcome to Eastern Circles and the E3 joint panel. We are a think tank, a Paris-based think tank working on defense technology and energy security. Eastern Circles, E3, I think doesn't need an introduction as the longest living and most famous, I think tank in France. And we are here originally, we thought about this panel, designing it around the report that we had a possibility to write together to co-author for NATO Allied Command Transformation. And this report is about the mapping the Miltech war, it's called, and it's published on both our websites. And it is about 8 technologies and the evolution of 8 defense technologies throughout the last 4 years of war, and how the lessons learned from this evolution of technology can be applied to the different war theaters, including beyond Ukraine. And I pass the microphone to the dear co-author Elie Tenenbaum, Director of Security Studies of IFRI, for his explanation about this report, how it came about, its objectives.
Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you for inviting me on the panel. Just right before I start on the origin story, Paris Defense and Security Forum is a wonderful place and very well organized, except for one thing, that they organized like overlapping panels for me. So I apologize in advance that I will have to leave a little bit early for the Q&A to run to another panel. Not because I don't like the panel or the audience, I love you, but I can't just be in 2 places at the same time. That aside, origin story of the report, I guess that as you know, all students of war and warfare, we've all seen throughout the last 4 years of since the large-scale invasion of Ukraine, many pieces about, you know, hype of the drone, unmanned systems, AI, electronic warfare, Starlink, you know, all these technological lessons that we see popping up in our social media feeds or in the reports that we read about Ukraine. But we had the feeling with Eastern Circles that maybe it would be good to have some sort of a kind of an overview of this technological evolution, sometimes called revolution, sometimes called evolution. And there was also kind of a debate about how new these were. Was was the use new, or was the technology new in itself? And so there was this discussion, and that we didn't really feel in the literature this kind of general overview, which would be technology-based and not conflict-based. So that's one thing. A second point that came in was the discussion that we had with NATO ACT, Allied Command Transformation, which, as you know, is responsible for the transformation of the alliance and its preparedness for future challenges, including, of course, technology. And they were, at the time where we launched the project last year, preparing for this sort of briefing of the Chief of Defense Staff, senior military leaders, to get them to this new reality. And you may also know that ACT is responsible, or has the oversight of JTAC, which is Joint Assessment Training and Education Center or something like that, which is based in Poland, but is responsible for collecting the lessons learned from the Ukraine conflict, and to bring it into the NATO armed forces, and also to foster innovation and funding of this new technology. So this is how we got to this report. And a final word before I pass on the mic to the panelists is that we often got a lot of discussions in France, but I guess with other military, with the NATO, that Ukraine is interesting, but it's a very peculiar conflict. NATO military will never found themselves in that situation because of air power, nuclear deterrence, that arguments that were used as an excuse not to learn too much from Ukraine. That is going to be a different war anyway, and why we agree that, of course, NATO military may look very different from the Ukrainian military, both as it was pre-full-scale invasion, but also has it transformed itself into where it is now. But the first argument is that NATO and many NATO allies today agree that, of course, Russia is the main threat to the alliance, and now the requirement, the capability requirement, the technological orientation of the military transformation is oriented towards the scenario, the main scenario, and it's in the French National Security Review from 2025, that a shock frontal military confrontation with Russia is now the central scenario that we are organizing our capability development around. It doesn't mean that there will never be any other missions. It just means that this is the driving factor. And we know that the Russian military that may confront NATO in the years to come will very probably look very much like the Russian military that is today attacking Ukraine. And if you want to be able to face successfully this force structure, you need to learn from the most recent development, and this happens in Ukraine, irrespective of whether you want to apply the same method that the Ukrainians do or use different, but just look at how it works. The recent conflict in the Gulf and the ongoing war right now in the Middle East also shows that these lessons are not even limited to the Euro-Atlantic area and the confrontation with Russia, but also with all the different actors that do engage with Russia in technology transfers and capability development. And it didn't take like a lot for us to say that the Shaheds built or designed in Iran, used and built in Russia, were the same that would be used against other key partners and allies. So I think that it goes further than just even the so-called eastern flank in terms of lessons. I stop there because I'm already too long. Thank you.
It's okay, we're just getting started, so no worries. Everybody's gonna have a word, and I'm gonna pass with that the mic to our moderator, Rodolphe Berlet, Secretary General of Eastern Circles. He is the former French Army officer, member of the Special Forces, and former sector commander of the OSCE mission in Donbass, where he spent 7 years actually working and living there. Rodolphe, please go ahead to introduce the panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Anastasia. I will just bring a little nuance. I was not commanding the entire OSCE mission. I was just, in UN terms, I was sector commander in Donbass for several years. And therefore, I'm very happy as I left in 2020, I'm very happy to catch up about what's going on right now in the conflict. It has taken such levels that are simply unbelievable. So it's my responsibility now to introduce the panel to you. Also a little preliminary remark. Nominally, I'm the moderator, but I'm a last-minute change. Initially, Anastasia was supposed to moderate, so you will see that more or less we are co-moderators. Don't be surprised if sometimes Anastasia gives the word to the various panelists. So first, as Denmark is the guest of honor, it's my pleasure to introduce Emilie Bertelsen from Denmark. She's a researcher at the Royal Danish Defense College. Lastly, she specialized in studying the transitions between peace models, war models. So she has very, very good ideas and insights in what's happening right now. Next lady is, no, ladies first, Anastasia Shaposhkina. actually the founder of Eastern Circle. It's quite a recent think tank based in Paris. We focus on Ukraine. And Anastasia's focus is initially energy, economics, but more or less we now have to work on military matters. Elie Tenenbaum, well known sur la place de Paris, is a director of security studies at IFRI. No need to introduce him. Next to me is Mikhail Kokoric. Mikhail Kokoric is almost, if you allow me, sort of a Russian Elon Musk. He could have become a Russian Elon Musk, but he was not really in harmony with the political leader. So he's a very, very multi-competency investor and industrialist. Lately, he has founded and he's CEO of Destinus. It's a very interesting company producing various types of operational, but rather deep strike strategic drones. He has very, very interesting achievements in that domain. And last but not least, James, but he prefers being called Jim Townsend. Colossal experience. Jim is from the United States, has worked 3-4 decades in transatlantic relations, and he's specialized in European, Central, Eastern European affairs. So the first question, and I will go per the report, the most known popular feature of Ukrainian war is, of course, the emergence of drones, especially the aerial drones. And that's a domain we, Eastern Circles, covered in that study, and therefore I will pass immediately the word to Anastasia.
Thank you, Rodolphe. I want to give credit also to the co-authors, Darina Marina Patyuk, sitting right here, who actually covered that section, and Bogdan Kastuk, who is now has to be at a different panel, but he covered also parts about AI, especially in QS. So on the UAV, we want to say that, you know, if you're looking at how it developed, we have to say that, of course, a lot of the coverage, media coverage, started in 2022, but in Ukraine, the use of the first FPV drones and the four-rotor drones, UAVs, started, and Mavic drones started already in 2014, when, especially if you remember the Russians' first invasion in the east of Ukraine, the battle for the airport of Donetsk. And there, the battle stuck for a long time, for a couple of months or more, around the dispatcher tower. And that's where the UAV, what was called wedding drone UAV, which used to be used for picture taking, was spontaneously kind of improvised, used by the fighters there to replace people who had to climb up the tower to see, or to climb up any high pole in the end of the day to see where the enemy positions were located. Well, you can very well imagine that climbing up any high position in a Donetsk airport in 2014 in the summer, when it was completely being leveled, was equivalent to a suicide mission. And the idea somebody had to use a wedding picture drone to do that immediately saved lives. So what the veterans of 2014-2015, once they went back to Kyiv after fighting a couple of years, started doing, they started lobbying aggressively Ukrainian MOD to introduce drones as part of Ukrainian military force, to introduce drones as technology, to introduce the training for drone pilots, and to use them more massively. That lobbying started in 2014. It fell on deaf ears. In parallel, since a lot of the people who were fighting that part of the war 11 years ago now, they came out of the business community of Ukraine. And the business community reacted to that demand. And while the government was ignoring that demand, the business started actually assembling, buying parts in China, assembling in Ukraine the drones, and started supplying them. However, and about 50 companies emerged back then, 2015, and that period. However, what they missed was the government orders, because as we all know, if there is no orders for the army, then the business, how is it going to actually be paid for producing those? So that first wave of drone producers kind of dissolved into the indecision of the MOD of Ukraine at the time. And that really set back Ukraine as it came in 2022. We often talk how Ukraine was still ahead of Russia in terms of this production of drones, etc., but it could have been much more ahead and it could have been much better prepared had those words not fallen on deaf ears. In 2022, we arrived at the market in Ukraine when 3 companies were producing drones and there were 6 drones ordered for the whole year of 2022 in January 2022. So dramatic situation. Now then, of course, the war, full-scale invasion starts, and eventually, when we get to the drones start being used, first we have, observation, and they are Leleka drones, Ukrainian production. Also, we see Bayraktar, Turkish drone, which in the first 6 months becomes pretty much less, becomes obsolete because it's too big, too easy to target, and eventually, what takes over, what is getting introduced also is dropper drones which would drop a charge and then come back to where they were sent, and then bomber drones. Of course, Bulava already was present on the Ukrainian side. Kamikaze drones developed very quickly, and eventually, especially as a response to the dearth of artillery in Ukraine. And drones regionally are there to replace the gap in artillery equipment. And eventually, the government understands their importance. They ensure full transparency of the front line today. They are responsible, especially the small 4-rotor FPV drones, for the creation of the so-called kill zone, which erased pretty much the front line as we know it, which erased the trenches as we know them, which converted the front line into a kill zone of 30 kilometers. Today, with full transparency and almost impossibility of evacuation of people. Also, they change, especially the small 4-rotor FPV and UAVs, they change the whole approach to the weapons production, emphasizing scaling. In the beginning 2024, Ukrainian government made an objective to produce 1 million drones inside Ukraine by the end of the year. By June 2024, they've reached that objective. Today, in the end of 2025, Ukraine produced 4 million drones domestically, and now their objective is 10 million drones domestically of this type. Of course, Ukrainians also are ahead of Russians in the production of the deep strike drones, and that's another kind of strong point there that they have. But what eventually we see today, the drone development means that 80% of casualties are due to UAVs, and also this has introduced the importance of the economic equation. That when a multi-million-dollar tank can be hit by a drone, a small drone which costs just a few thousands, and that changes the duration in the war of attrition. So these are the main points.
Yes, one thing I remember from my years on the front line between 14 and 20 was a totally different approach about using the drones between the Ukrainian forces and the separatists and the Russians. Separatists and the Russians were very dismissive, and at the contrary, Ukrainian not only the regular army but the volunteer battalions were extremely intellectually agile and immediately jumped on the use of drones, and they kept that advance, and they created actually an entire bottom-up system, an ecosystem of production, and I think Emily has a lot to say about that.
Let's see if this is on. I think we're good. Yeah. Because we were talking about before that going into the war, there was only a handful of Ukrainian producers. Today, the landscape is dominated by about 550 drone producers. Those are the ones we know about. But the impressive thing is not only the scaling of production. Even though we're talking millions of drones that are domestically either assembled or have components manufactured in Ukraine, the really impressive thing for me to note here is that the technological lifetime of this is so short. The technology is outdated on the battlefield within 4 to 6 weeks. That's sort of the current timeline. Just a year ago, that was 3 to 6 months that a system would be operational before it sort of became out-innovated by Russian counter-adaptation. 4 to 6 weeks now is the norm. So when we see all these producers producing so many drones, it's not only about actually scaling up that production, it's about keeping it technologically relevant. And for me, that becomes a question of the ecosystem. Who actually enables that development? And in Ukraine, it's been a bumpy ride getting there. Actually, during the very first weeks of the conflict, we see engineers joining the frontline units, helping adapt a lot of these commercial technologies and actually making them relevant for warfighting. That are things, you've probably seen some of this, like a grenade strapped under a drone, zip ties, if you're lucky, duct tape, this sort of thing. This becomes much more technologically, I would say, it evolves over time. Today, we're talking about systematic production of modular components. But these are tailored specifically to the operations we see on the front today. That is based on the specific knowledge from the warfighters themselves of what is needed. And that development and the speed with which it has happened is only actually possible because you have these engineers on the front lines in real time doing hardware and software development. So for me, it becomes a question of understanding how do such ecosystems work? How do you facilitate them? How do you foster that interaction between the defense and the private sector and sort of non-traditional defense technology producers? And I think there's a lot to learn from Ukraine in that perspective. One of the things that I particularly note in the Ukrainian model is actually that every frontline development sort of originates in a practical problem that then becomes translated into requirements that people design for. And if any of you have had anything to do with like native development processes, this is generally not how we tend to do it. This idea that requirements change so quickly, there's no time to centralize them. So it becomes about directly responding to that and then scaling up the solutions. One of the things in Ukraine that has actually allowed this is the sort of the creation of new procurement platforms. So I don't know if you've ever seen this Brave One marketplace, for example. It pretty much, I think it was popularly called Amazon for drones. And it's a website you can go onto, and you can order new drones. Seems fairly simple, but this was a direct response to the need for units to order drones no more than about a week before they're used. Most centralized procurement systems cannot handle this. So there was a need to push that procurement authority down in the organization. In Ukraine, that took the form of about 1,500 procurement officers and 400 units now having procurement authority. Not for everything, but for things like drones that are expendable. So for me, this points to the ecosystem is much deeper than we think. There's a really nice quote from Magyar, the chief of the unmanned system force, so the drone branch of the Ukrainian army. And he says, it's not about the pilot itself. Behind him, there's a machine. So when people come and ask him, what is the best drone? He says, well, the best drone is the ecosystem. So I think that's where we need to look here to actually understand the advantage and why drones have become so prominent in Ukraine.
Maybe, Jim, you have something to comment on that ecosystem viewed from the US.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to see you all, and it's great to be on this panel. I spent about 35 years in the Pentagon, so I've seen a lot of evolution and revolution in military affairs, and this is certainly one that takes the cake for me. And so as I think about this, I think about the adaptation of all these lessons learned from Ukraine, particularly because it's tech-related, it's fast-moving tech, it's procurement that's fast, quick turnaround on the battlefield. And a lot of this, to me, is very unique to the Ukraine battlefield. And the future battlefields that we're going to be having to deal with aren't necessarily going to have the characteristics of Ukraine, where you have an industrial base that's there, where you have a system, as was just described, a system that can move quickly and adapt quickly, because if they don't, they're going to lose very, very quickly. And so I think about that, and I think about these lessons, and I watch what Ukraine is doing, and I try to think about the U.S. system and how quickly can we also move. In the Pentagon, I can tell you, it doesn't move as fast as you want it to move. There's times when it does, but having something in terms of procurement and in terms of getting changes fast to the field and the adaptation, I think the Pentagon is working on that right now, trying to break things so that things can move more quickly, but I think they're still in the breaking stage. And so I worry about our adaptation and how quickly we can. And for me, the case study, I have to say what I'm worried about, and I watch carefully, is Karg Island. If as the Marines, the two MUs that are heading to Karg Island, potentially, we don't know where they're going, but if you just as your case study, you think about, okay, if they're going to Karg Island, what will they face there? Concerning the adversary, who will be getting a lot of lessons learned already from their participation in Ukraine with their shaheeds, and also potentially Russian advisors that might very well be there. I'm not saying there are, but certainly the Russians have been aiding Iran. So as you're thinking about Karg Island and thinking about those Marines getting onto Karg Island, how well adapted are they to the type of warfare they might find there that comes out of Ukraine? I can tell you, I know the Marines enough to know that they have been working on this, and particularly in the Pacific. Drones are not something that's unknown to the Marines, for sure. But they're going to go there, and they're going to be on an island that's not Ukraine. It's not the same battlefield as Ukraine. It's not the same logistics as Ukraine. It's not the same software compatibility where you've got somebody doing code, 25 miles behind the line to update something on a drone. If their battlefield is going to be something like an island, like Karg, how well suited are they for what they might find there? And for me, as I think about adaptation and I think about how are we going to take these lessons from Ukraine and face a future battle, my concern is exactly this adaptation. Are our systems, whether it's procuring in the Pentagon or it's the guys on the front line who've got to think like Ukraine thinks, are they ready to adapt anytime soon? Maybe in 5 years or so. I mean, things move slowly. But right now, in terms of the United States, we've got a today problem. It's going to be in a couple of weeks. As I watch that, I'm hoping that the ability to adapt to these lessons learned, that we can move fast enough. Because lessons learned are great. And we can do case studies and all this type of thing, but my concern is if the guy on the front line is able to take advantage of these lessons learned in a timely fashion to take on the enemy, or are they always going to be chasing these lessons, trying to adapt to them, but always being behind?
Yeah, actually, Jim, one thing you might be facing if you really go for the Karg Island are these uncrewed sea vessels. And that's a weapon that really appeared after 22, after the full-scale invasion. And that's a domain actually we covered in Eastern Circles. So I will pass again the floor to Anastasia.
Just briefly to kind of touch upon this technology. So it's another one which converted from the kind of peaceful use to which adopted from normal peaceful use technology, commercial off-the-shelf technology, to the military use. But I would just underline quickly 3 stages of development of this technology, which emerged when we did interviews for the report with the producers. And the first stage was, of course, when you had, you remember the 2022, so the blockade pretty much of the southern kind of border of Ukraine and the Black Sea, the impossibility to export grain, to do agriculture exports, which for Ukraine are the blood life of its economy as well. And so there, the first immediate goal of people who were preoccupied with this adaptation, and there, of course, we hear about the 2 models which emerged, like Sea Baby and Magura, which were in turn kind of supervised, so to say, by the the agencies, special agencies of Ukraine. So the two special agencies, special service forces agencies, and they what they created was originally was a drone which had a target to target and to destroy or incapacitate military ships. They succeeded in doing that and incapacitating 25% of the Russian fleet, and the rest of the Russian fleet basically had to park itself in Novorossiysk, and that didn't give Ukraine the control over the Black Sea, but it allowed the freedom of navigation. The second wave was, however, to allow these boats, the drones, the naval drones, to work, and we are talking about USVs here, right, the surface drones, to work in groups and to accomplish missions in groups. That was a second stage of development, and that was accomplished between 2024 and 2025. And then the third stage, which we've seen last year, was to make different groups of naval drones work interoperability together. And there we've seen the conversion of a sea drone into a robotic platform, where one group would be in charge, for example, of controlling the naval space, the other would be in charge of bringing down the helicopters or eventually we saw military jets, and the third would be in charge of, for example, dealing with the EW. And then we've seen the different installations that can take place on a naval drone as a platform, actually, from missile launchers, small caliber, to the automatic turrets, to the EW equipment, and that allows the groups of naval drones interoperate, work in tandem, and not only defend now the space right in the southern flank of Ukraine, but also attack Russian ships in the Novorossiysk port and on their own territory. These are just three developments I'd like to underline. And with that, potentially turn to this other important drone area, which is deep strike drones and the development of missiles in Ukraine, on which I know that Michael can walk us through. How has this sector evolved in the 4 years, and especially in the light of criticism often we hear in the military and in general in Ukrainian press, right, that drones were privileged over missiles, and then it got more funding, more attention, more government support, and missile production kind of fell behind due to that. What has been your experience? What has been your experience with the evolution of this market, of this sector, and how is it evolving going forward? Because we do feel that there is a big need for missiles, of course.
Yeah, I mean, with Decimus, we kind of participated in this process of evolution of the deep strike systems, and I would call probably then affordable or low-cost deep strike systems, because deep strike systems existed like for a long time. Tomahawks, I mean, they existed. We are talking about specifically this low-cost deep strike systems, which now also have another capability to be oversaturating with like a huge number of the systems. So we started actually to deliver the first one in 2023, on the second year of the war, and we've been one of the first companies which was in this wave of the long-range strategic drones, yeah, which eventually was able to fly more than 1,000 kilometers and deliver up to 100 kilograms of payload, yeah, and so we delivered many thousands of them, but actually we're probably one of the first companies who actually decided to switch from the long-range strike drones, which was kind of model of the planes from the Second World War, yeah. Or from the First World War, with the piston engines, to the missiles, and now we probably one of the biggest producer of missiles in the world, who's producing hundreds of missiles, real big missiles per month. So people actually underestimate the volume that now the missiles is produced and used in the war. But I think it's better to look on again a little bit helicopter view and see how this market was or how the situation had evolution in Ukraine in this 4 years. So first, why this deep strike systems, the needs for them emerged? Yeah, because before nobody needed it. People use this whatever was thinking you can use Tomahawks or you can use the planes, the bombers, yeah, strategic bombers. Actually, the war between between Russia and Ukraine became a first war where the use of aviation became limited. It's not like what now U.S. was able to bomb Iran. So the use of the aviation of Russia over the Ukraine and Ukraine over the Russia was extremely limited because of the air defense capabilities. So it means this low-cost way of delivering the bombs was obsolete. You know, look, in the Second World War, the Allies was able to destroy the cities, yes, with the bombs. Now it's not happening. I mean, every time in Kiev, but yeah, it's happened. But you don't have thousands of tons of the bombs that come into the cities. Yeah, it's become almost impossible for the plane to go through the sophisticated air defense and deliver low-cost bombs, because bombs is the cheapest thing that you can deliver. So then everybody started to think in the beginning of the war how to start to do substituted. Russia actually started to initially just use the old, let's say, traditional Soviet cruise missiles. Yeah, before Shaheds, before they bought Shaheds or get a license from Iran. And Ukraine also had several attempts. It was, if you remember, it was attempts to basically take a normal, let's say, general aviation planes, to put a simple autopilot, put explosives and send it, or use this Soviet style jet trainer Strish, yeah, also reprogram it, put explosives and send it. It was actually not bad examples, but the main limitation was still, let's say, availability and the cost. Yeah, you don't have this many Strish, or you don't have many of these general aviation planes. I mean, they are not optimized for this. So then we started to build it, and actually we got requests from the Ukrainian army, say, hey, can you build us Ukrainian Shaheds? Russia already started to use the Shaheds. They got a license, and then the first Shaheds started to have these devastating attacks. It was still not the numbers that we see this year and last year. It was a much smaller numbers. But Ukraine also say, okay, let's do this. And we start to deliver this, and basically over the years, we see that our delivery and the production of Ukrainian industry, and definitely Russia is scaled up to, tens of thousands or thousands of the drones per month. Yeah. So, and you see in the recent attacks, it's hundreds, easily, a few hundreds of the drones from both sides. And then this basically substitute all this, the previous, I would say, bricolage, yeah, these artisan, contraptions that was before, and even Russia, they actually mostly rely on the Shaheds. I mean, they use, for sure, the ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles, but still the mass attacks is done by Shaheds. And for Ukraine, the same. But then we start to feel actually limitation of this approach, yeah, and the limitation of this approach start to feel from the two sides. First, when you really need to launch hundreds of these drones per night, yeah, then it starts to be a problem. I mean, I remember our first drones was basically use airfield to launch, yeah, it's a real airfield, a piece of the road. Then we moved to the catapult, then everybody moved to the rocket boosters, yeah. So, but still, even with the rocket boosters, it's a big contraption. This drone is a big, and Russia still have advantage that hopefully soon will be obsolete, because they can use the fortified shelters to launch it. If you see the Russia, what they're doing, they build these fortified shelters where they actually truck with the Shaheds can go in, and through the opening can launch one after another and basically do it pretty safely, because basically Ukrainian army doesn't have any means to destroy the shelter. It's protected with 1 meter of concrete. It's cheap to build it. And they have dozens of them, yeah, along the border in the different ways. Ukraine, unfortunately, was not able to do this because Russian, they had a ballistic missile. So if Ukraine would build the shelters, it would be basically a matter of time when they know that the shelters exist and basically just destroy the shelters with Iskander, yeah? So the Ukrainians come with a different model to make a mobile launches. So this is what we did with our drones and with other drones. Basically, it's like a truck coming, and then you have the KPI. You need to launch in 5 minutes as many drones as you can. Why 5 minutes? Because this is a time for flight for Iskander. So if somebody spot you are here, in 5 minutes you'll get a present, which we saw many times. Yeah, and with the scaling, this it's become a real problem. So now you need hundreds of trucks basically to launch the hundreds of the drones. And it's almost become extremely difficult logistic operation, which can be easily spotted by the reconnaissance drones with a thermal camera, by the spies on the ground, by any means. So it's extremely difficult, yeah? Second problem, we all start to know how to intercept these drones with another interceptor drones because they are slow. They fly in 200 maximum kilometers per hour. So you can use a simple drone to basically intercept it. And now both what we see in Ukraine, but Russia doing the same. They're actually more and more efficient in intercepting these drones. So and we see that now it's a move to the next step. And why we think it's move again to the missiles, but in a different missiles that built like 10 times cheaper, the cruise missiles. Yeah, because first, it's like a vehicle that flying at higher speed. You can have smaller wings. You can put it like fold these wings. You can launch from one container dozens of them. This is what we are doing. You can do this in extremely fast and reliable way. You can do this fast, and also they are fast enough that the interceptor drones not anymore can intercept it. So you again need missiles to intercept it. So you raise like a elevation. You elevate the problems. And definitely the payload is bigger. It's already hundreds of kilograms. And this is what we see in transition to moving from the strike drones to the actually low-cost cruise missiles. And on low cost, we say like it's 10 times cheaper than the previous missiles. And here we see that Europe is missing. I mean, they are now doing as one-way factor tender. Let's build the strike drones. Come on, guys. Strike drones era will be finished in 1 year. This will be substituted by low-cost cruise missiles. And this is what we see. And then will be era, hopefully, of the low-cost also tactical ballistic missiles, but it's a future story. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mikhail. Actually, as a sound and successful industrialist, you insist a lot on cost, cost efficiency. And as the war now lasts, enters phases of attrition, these deep strikes will impact industrial potential of the opponent. And I think that is something, that equation that actually IFRI covered in that report. So I pass.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, and building up on Mikhail's very apt description of this gradual extension of the ranges and the battlefields, so just because, again, we're talking a lot about terms very vague like drones. Drones don't exist. You have so many different types. So you have the what I call the close fight, and then you have the deep fight. So the close fight, which is getting deeper and deeper, as Anastasia was referring to with and Mikhail with the extension of the kill zone. So this 5 million drones, small drones, tactical drones, strike drones that are being used every day, and you're right, increasingly replaced by new systems. On one side, you'd have to add the glide bombs, the cabs, which are also making a lot of damage, about 80,000 of them. And of course, the old classic old artillery strikes. So this is the close fight. And then you have the rear zone or the deep fight, which had this very interesting evolution, is that historically, the rear zone or the deep fight used to be accessible only to those who had the aviation and who had the air superiority. What Ukraine showed in the first place, and what the conflict in the Middle East is showing right now, is that you can have no air superiority, as Russia was unable to get air superiority in the first days of the full-scale invasion. And of course, Iran right now is totally deprived of even, contemplating the idea of air superiority, because they totally granted. Even in their situation, they still have access to the operational and strategic depth through these deep strike capabilities. Russia is now producing about 80,000 Grand, so the Shahed equivalent drones every year. About 2,000 cruise and ballistic missiles that they use in combination with one another. And with this, even without, for how long hasn't there been a Russian plane flying over, let's say, Kyiv area for 4 years now, and still they able to bomb Kyiv every night using this strike. So this is a big change in our perception of warfare, because the deep area is now accessible to even belligerents that do not enjoy even temporary air superiority. To confront this, you have two lines of action. One is, of course, air defense, both active and passive. We should not underestimate the importance of passive defense, and Ukraine has made a lot of improvement in the societal resilience, in building the shelters, and organizational changes, dispersion. All this is still very important. And if you're looking at Israel, the case of Israel, of course, you have a lot of of lessons also to be learned from there, with a society which is entirely built. Built in a constructions mentality around passive defense. But of course, you have air defense, active air defense, and the requirement. And here, I have to say that I've been looking at the conflict in the Middle East with a kind of a bitter outlook, because it's been 4 years now that those of us who are trying to learn from the Ukrainian experience were telling the European defense companies, beware of those low-cost, one-way attack vehicles, Shahed styles, that are coming at you with low-cost and greater numbers. There were thousands of them in the first year, hundreds in the first year, thousands, then tens of thousands. And now we're going to see hundreds of thousands in 1 year. And for this, the Western countries, NATO countries, do not have an integrated air and missile defense that is built for that kind of numbers. They are built to deal with, low hundreds of high-tech vehicles. Even the high-tech vehicles like cruise and ballistics are now in the thousands. So even that layer, the high-tech layer, is far from meeting the requirement. But regarding the Shahed style, let's say one-way attack, it's pretty clear that Ukraine has been a fast innovator in first kinetic active defense, AAA, anti-aircraft artillery, and now interceptor drones that do have this cost ratio that is important. Again, it's not about cost. It's not about money, because money is about the numbers that you get in the end. I mean, I'd be happy to pay $1 million for every Shahed if it was possible, but not only it's not budgetary sustainable, but it's not industrially sustainable, because you will never have the production apparatus to produce $2 million interceptor for every Shahed if you're facing tens or hundreds of thousands of that kind of thing. And at the time of the last 4 years, an answer I had a lot from defense industries in Europe was that, Ukraine is very specific, once again. We cannot really copy-paste all the lessons. And by the way, we have orders full with Middle Eastern clients who are happy with expensive, exquisite air defense systems. Well, guess what? Those Middle Eastern clients right now are interested in Ukrainian solutions for cheap air defense. And the final point, of course, so you have air defense, and then the other alley is shoot the archer mentality. And it's pretty clear when you're looking at the kind of threat that is coming both from Russia or Iran, it's never going to be sustainable anyway to have a strictly denial or interdiction strategy. You have to go for the archer, and I think that the Gulf states right now are building up an operation that's called Shoot the Archer, which is exactly the same term that is used in Ukraine. And for that, this is going to be, of course, against deep strikes, with kind of very specific systems that will need to connect intelligence and surveillance reconnaissance with effectors, because what you have in front, and exactly what Mikhail was referring to, was the launch systems that are going to be more mobile and fleeting targets. So you're going to need to locate very quickly where the shoot came from so that you can shoot back before the launch system has moved away. And this is going to be a big challenge for in the future years.
I want to take up right from there and turn us maybe to a larger kind of zoom out of the technology, and because what you were saying about the shifting demand of the kind of key money, sources in the Middle East, right? The key buyers in the Middle East, their shifting demand, their shifting need, brings us to think about the markets, the defense market, and how then the position of the Western producers of weapons is going to shift, and how the position of Ukrainian actors is going to shift, and what are the models that Ukrainians are using now in the European, more active European countries, because again, yes, a lot of people have been, all of this has been falling on deaf ears in many cases, but in some cases it hasn't. And I know Denmark has been very active in this case. So maybe I would like to just throw that question about the markets at the three of you, so Mikhail, and then Jim, and then Emily. And just, Mikhail, maybe starting with you, how do you see the role, the perception of Ukrainian weapons producers? How do you see their role going forward? And you can actually position yourself from the Western point of view, because you are actually based in Switzerland, so you know the perception. And it seems to us that it has evolved from this kind of, is evolving now in the last 3 weeks, from the perception of some people are tinkering in the garage, to contracts with the DoD, to first Ukrainian unicorn, to the IPO of some Ukrainian companies in New York Stock Exchange. So how do you see that development? And then to Jim, with the same question and the perception in NATO, and how do you, Jim, see the role, the whole market changing in terms of technology, demand and supply, and the role of Western companies in that market, and then to the Danish model with Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, even that we started actually before the war and started in the West, and all our engineering and most of our production facilities actually in the West. We have huge presence in Ukraine with both production and also with our deployment team. So by Genesis as a company, yes, we're a Western company, but I think culturally we're like Ukrainian company with a bunch of Ukrainians also in our team, and with a lot of this fast cycle of innovation. And I think this is was the main difference. I mean, the real needs and this the basically existential push to do it. Yeah, it was for all Ukrainian companies. For us, it was existential, because we have people there. It's we really try to, somebody defend from this bastard, somebody just to kill this bastard. So and we have our own account against these guys. We really try to push hard and did hundreds of changes. For example, just cruise missile, yeah? We did an insane number of tests and the flights and the changes for last year and a half, 2 years, until when we mature our system. We did only the test flights more than 50, yeah, which was in unseen number from the normal Western any developer. With a real use with hundreds, we did more than 100 changes in the design over this time to the missile, and we how we do this. First, we have full vertical control. We built turbojet engine, we built solid rocket motors, we built warhead, we built arm infusing devices, control system, GNSS system, guidance system. It's only a few systems that we actually buy in, but then we have full control, and we can, SpaceX, make a huge and fast evolution of this. And this is what Ukrainian companies also doing. They're extremely vertically integrated. They really focus on the result. They do many changes. Sometimes from the feedback and to the change, it came a days. Yeah, it's we get the feedback and do these changes. And yes, I mean, we need to have industrial might. And now we have thousands, people, we produce this in a massive scale, and really we use automobile factories to produce it. We really have close automobile factories to produce cruise missiles, yeah? in these numbers. And I think this is our involvement to the Western industry. And the first couple of years, European primes was look at us kind of this, underdogs, these people, nobody wanted to work with us. We asked, hey, can you build for us a warhead? So no, come on. It's just we have so many contacts, just go away. So then, okay, we decided to do it by ourselves. Now the situation changed. Now I would say, honestly, we have not only interest, we have partnerships, joint work with almost every European primes. Deep collaboration. They now feel why we are different. Yeah, this recent this. I think this is a normal for almost any industry. Yeah, it's for the big companies extremely difficult to innovate. Look, like even IT, it's not the Google who invented Facebook. Yeah, it's not the Yandex who did the Google, and not Facebook and Google who did let's say OpenAI. Finally, so it's natural for the new players, for the more smaller companies who's a faster innovator, more motivated, can do the stuff. We just while we are trying to do this product market fit, for example, first 2 years we've been really trying to, in a business sense, to find the product market fit, what we can do very fast, and then we decided, okay, we're going to build these 2 verticals, strike systems, interceptor systems, based on the missiles. Yeah, so we're a missile company, we're not drone company, we're not UAV company, we're a missile company. We want to make missiles the cheapest, efficient, and defend the Europe and democracy by giving this a new tool. Yeah, and now I think it will be a lot of let's say, getting back from the Ukrainian industry. We see many Ukrainian companies went to West. Yeah, in Denmark, I will not tell, but actually in Denmark, including us, you see other companies moving and really doing the production facility. And now also capital market opened. Yeah, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was impossible to open banking account. So when first was leakage that we are supplying to drones to Ukraine, the banks closed account for us, for myself, for my adult kids. Basically, at some moment, we've been almost completely debunked from the banking system, yeah, because it was the porno. I still remember you put the sticker are you in porno? Are you doing this cannabis? This and then defense. We've been in the same list. Now we are ECG. Sorry, it's to say we're ECG. Yeah, if they invest to us, it's ECG investments, and now we have no problem with money. So actually we don't need to think about money at all. Yeah, but. And this war showed actually that West, Gulf countries cannot rely anymore for the legacy solutions. They need to get what Ukraine been developed, and I think it would be mainstream after this war. We'll have 2, 3, 4 new primes in Europe, definitely, and some of them will be Ukrainian companies.
Mm. Jim, what is your perception? How do you see American companies, Western companies here in Europe, because you are in Europe a lot, and NATO perceive Ukrainian players? And how will the market develop, in your opinion, given the emergence of these cheaper, scalable weapons, which are now more in demand, and given that the lessons in Ukraine war, after all, are applicable in the Middle East?
Well, thank you very much. Well, things certainly in Europe have changed so much over the past couple of years than where they were 5, 10 years ago. There wasn't a lot moving here, and there wasn't the focus, certainly, because at the time there wasn't the immediacy of it. And as we began to see more and more, not just lessons coming out of Ukraine and feeling that we as the West weren't prepared, but also the message coming out of a lot of the intel agencies in Europe and in the U.S. that we're going to be facing an aggressive Russia in the next few years, and we had better hurry. And then, of course, transatlantic issues with the U.S. Also hastened a lot of work being done in Europe to make some real progress in areas like tech. And so there's a lot going on in Europe right now. I think there is still a deficit somewhat if you compare it to the U.S., but many commentators are saying that Europe is not far behind. They are going to be much more quick to catch up than a lot of people think. There's a lot of underestimation in the past, and I think we're going to see a lot of progress in Europe. You mentioned NATO, and I think this is important too. NATO and the EU as well in terms of financing, but I think NATO has been an accelerator as far as getting allies access to tech, to startup countries, to seeing what everybody has been doing. The Diana program at NATO, the NATO funding program, Allied Command Transformation, of course, we've mentioned that already. There's quite a ferment in NATO on tech and trying to show the way in terms of what nations need to do. And in terms of defense planning at NATO, in terms of the war plans being put together, I think it's not just a matter of nations seeing what's out there in terms of tech, but having a better understanding of what's going to be required of them by NATO in terms of capability goals they're going to have to meet, in terms of war plan responsibilities they're going to have to meet as well. So there's a lot more happening at NATO to to push the tech side than there has been in the past. And that's something I give NATO a lot of credit for. I worked at NATO a number of years ago, and the NATO headquarters is a very different place than today than where it was when I was there. And so I think NATO has helped in terms of Europe, particularly in getting tech moving. But two points to emphasize. At the end of the day, for NATO, NATO can only go so far as the allies in terms of showing the allies what's out there, in terms of doing exercises with the allies to show this in practice, in terms of capability goals and this type of thing. NATO as an institution can only go so far. It's up to the nations themselves. It's up to the allies to take that and then put the money towards it and to purchase the capability and to adapt it to their military forces. And that's the long pole in the tent, quite frankly, is getting the nations to use the additional monies that's now going into defense budgets and figuring out what tech, what items, what defense items that involve tech, of course, AI and this type of thing, what makes the most sense for them. And this is where I worry about, because I think we've got a similar problem too, is in terms of the markets, there's a lot out there. And I think within NATO, within the allied capitals and defense ministries, it's a tough decision on what to buy in terms of getting involved with tech. It's tough to know what to buy when we've talked about the changes. You're so afraid of buying something that might be what you need right now. By the time it's delivered, it's obsolete. So what do they go with? How do they make decisions? That freezes up the procurement system because people are afraid to make a decision, have their prime minister put money towards it, and then it's no good. So this is a problem in terms of moving tech forward into the services so that they can have that, so they can take advantage of that. That's the problem. And then the second point, just to make it again, is the adaptation of this of tech and the equipment that is involved with tech, getting it into the services and having the services adapt to it so they can use it well. It's taken Ukraine a long time to get there. I don't think we should sugarcoat that. I mean, when you think back to 2014, can you imagine the Ukraine military in 2014 looking like they do today? It's taken a long time for them to get there, but they did. But if you look at our forces, and I'm talking about the U.S. as well as other allied forces, we've got a similar journey ahead for us too. And a lot of times, procurement systems as well as the military services don't like to make mistakes. I mean, that's certainly in the U.S. side. They're risk averse. So we don't move as quickly as we might need to move. And those are problems there that we're going to have to deal with as allies, particularly as NATO comes up with war plans, NATO comes up with force goals, and they talk to the allies through the defense planning process. And the allies say, well, we're not there yet because we haven't been able to make a decision about whether to get this kind of drone or this kind of drone or what. And so those are things that I think as we talk about the revolution in military affairs, we talk about the incredible things that we're seeing coming out of the industry. That's the easy part. The hard part is putting the money towards it and then incorporating what we've purchased into the services, having them train, having them to develop a new force structure to provide the logistics and this type of thing. I mean, the great example to me, and then I'll turn the microphone over, but the great example to me is if you're a frontline platoon, if you're at the platoon level, and you've realized that the drones that you brought with you to the fight are outmoded. They were just delivered to the unit 6 months ago, but they get to the fight and they're already outmoded. You got to have software changes. How is that going to work on a battlefield back to Karg Island? How is that going to work on a battlefield like that? That's not Ukraine. Who's going to be sending them the software changes? I guess there'll be a couple of guys in the platoon who are going to input it into the system, but I don't know about you, but I've been in plenty of opportunities with the internet goes down and you're SOL, as they say. So to me, it's really this idea of can we make sure that we can get tech to the point where it's usable at the platoon level. so that it's actually something useful in a fight and not something that you got to put aside because you don't have the kind of logistic support that Ukraine has had, but you don't have to make this piece of tech work for you.
And this is exactly what Jim was saying. Like, what is about the national level? And we hear so much about Denmark, of course. First, if you go to Ukraine, as we do regularly, we see at expos, there are whole delegations from Denmark. Terna, to give just one example, is very active there, including with their accelerator, etc. And then there is this whole Danish model. Can you demystify this for us and tell us how do you then react on the national level?
So I'm going to fly into this a bit, sort of following up on Jim, which is you can't really stockpile drones in the traditional way. And this is not just the case for drones. It's the case for most technology that evolves at this rate, specifically sort of software-dependent systems. So what you buy into when you buy into this model of development is the ability to rapidly change. And that comes in the collaboration with the people who can actually help you carry that change. We have the benefit of time right now. Not in sort of we have infinite time to do this, but we're not currently under the same pressure Ukraine was. It took Ukraine several years to figure out many of the mechanisms they now have to facilitate this collaboration that underpins the technological effectiveness. So what we learn from, for example, we have the models like the Danish model, which is a donation model. We provide support to Ukrainian defense industry. We do this by directly donating to Ukrainian companies. We do this because they know better what they need than we can ever do. So we make sure they get exactly what they need at a certain point in the fight. But there's also a benefit of this, and that is closer collaboration with an industry that has experience. With what is happening here, it's not about buying a specific technology. The IP for this is getting, outdated very rapidly. Of course, this is not equally the case for every technology, but it is for a lot of the defining stuff in this war. So what you're actually buying into is the ability to engage in that collaboration, that trust, and people who have proven experience with that. So when you see things like the Danish model, where you build up collaboration, this is a way of fostering that while we wait for sort of the bigger mechanisms to start evolving at the state and the organizational level for the militaries. This experience is actually being created between the companies, and it's being created through initiatives. You mentioned NATO's Innovation Fund. There's actually a joint NATO Brave initiative, which has just launched a counter-UAS call just yesterday or today, that fosters direct collaboration between European companies or NATO member companies and Ukrainian companies. So I see that a lot of this transfer of knowledge and of experience with working with this type of development model is actually happening. But it's happening with players that are not sort of traditionally included in the decision-making here. So we have some of this experience. Now it's a question of, do we actually manage to capitalize on it and leverage it?
There is a big aspect also of that study that revolves around full digitalization of the war. I mean, spatial dimension for communication, observation, then the use of artificial intelligence, feeding that the battle management systems, etc. And that is something Eli, I think, is ready to share with us before he leaves.
Yeah, absolutely, because I am very much time constrained here, so you will whole have to read the report to know more. But very quickly, the kill zone that we've been talking about, and that is very much the characteristic of the at least the most recent iteration of the war right now is actually not a zone but a web. It's a kill web. So if you want to picture it, the Russian infantry unit that is bombed by hand grenade, this hand grenade has been dropped by a drone. This drone was probably connected to another drone that was doing the relay antenna, and this other drone was probably piloted by a unit in a foxhole some kilometers away that is connected thanks to Starlink connection and receiving orders from a battalion headquarters that is texting them on Signal or WhatsApp using this Starlink internet. And so you have this internet of the battlefield, and then you have a lot of Russian units that are trying to jam this, that are trying to jam the GPS system, that are trying to intercept, locate the drone operators. So it's an internet of the battlefield that needs to be understood as a web, as an information systems heavy and very dense, that connects everything. And then you need a software interface to manage this, which is increasingly fitting above, upload some data that are now feeding an AI algorithm that will help those loops for the kill web to enhance and to learn and so on and so forth. So it's very complex. I would try to explain that as much simple as possible in the report. Now I have to leave. As the Russians say, it's not a strategic retreat, it's a strategic redeployment. So I have to move to another place. Please accept my apologies to that. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Please give a round of applause to Rodolphe Berlet, Mikhail Kokorich, Emily, Jim. Thank you so much. Have a good way.